This event happened about 5 years ago when I was 22. My girlfriend at the time and I were both ostracized by our respective families for choosing to date each other. In retrospect, I guess our family members could see the writing on the wall. However, we were young and naive, believing that love would conquer all, which turned out to be wrong. But I digress. I was recently out of work, but we did have income from her full-time job. So, we had a plan to live cheaply for a month while we saved for a place, and I looked for work. We were essentially homeless and living out of our car. We could only go back home if we weren't together anymore. So, we decided we could make it on our own without help and overcome this hurdle. We lived in a very affluent part of town in a wealthy suburb in Florida, so it was always hot and humid out with low crime rates. However, sleeping in a small sports car was not ideal for a month. She spent her days working, and I spent mine looking for work and making money however I could. At night, it was the only extended period we spent in the car. After a few nights of sleeping in Home Depot parking lots, we decided that the beach would be a much easier place to get a decent night's sleep. However, the beach is closed at night, and as we found out, for good reasons. Even though the beach is closed, it's littered with 30-story hotels, houses, and bars, so it's hard to constantly patrol, not to mention the fact that it's huge 30-plus miles of premium beach. We found a nice spot up in the cattails and tall beach plants and set up a place to stay. We kept most of our belongings in the car, so we just looked like a couple of stargazers who happened to fall asleep on some towels. This went great for about a week, and I'll tell you, if it weren't for the situation, I would have loved it. Sleeping outside can be so refreshing in our modern culture. We dodged the police one night after we had a spotlight in our eyes from a patrolling jeep. When asked if we were sleeping, we said no, and he went on his way, only after saying, "Hope not." I'm a clean-shaven 5'8", 180 pounds white guy, and she's a 5'1", 110 pounds white girl in nice clothes. We didn't exactly look homeless. I wish we would have taken the hint. 2 days later, we were doing the usual, and everything went off without a hitch. We were up out of the way, and you would either have to know where we were or just stumble upon us. We were probably 30 yards from the shoreline. I was awakened out of a deep sleep at 3 a.m., and I'm a heavy sleeper, like sleeping through a nuclear war heavy sleeper. So, it was unusual for me. However, I took a sip of water and tried to go back to sleep when I noticed 2 figures down by the shore. I wasn't too alarmed at first because there have been a few occasions when we watched people go swimming late at night or teens have a little party. But we were never noticed, and everybody seemed very benign. However, I just couldn't stop watching these 2 figures. One was a giant, I'm talking 6'6" or taller, the other was average height. I woke my girlfriend up after they seemed to keep looking our way and making hand gestures. They were too far away to make out what they were saying. Up until that point, I had always wanted to give most people the benefit of the doubt. Most people are good, right? I'm not so sure anymore. I could feel their ill intent. It was palpable. It scared the hell out of me. We had our valuables on our person phones, wallets, keys, just in case something happened. I had always heard that the homeless make easy targets, and I can attest to that now. We saw them pass a glass pipe back and forth. Judging by the shape and the amount of time the substance stayed red, I can only imagine it to be some sort of cocaine or amphetamine. They put the pipe away and proceeded to beeline straight towards us. We stood up on full alert and tried to decide what to do. We surprised them. I guess they figured we were asleep. That made them pause, giving us crucial moments to come up with an escape route. They changed tactics. The giant proceeded to walk straight toward us, and the average man made a wide half circle trying to flank us at 9 o'clock. I grabbed my girlfriend's arm as she was gathering our items that I was okay with abandoning and never seeing again. She dropped the unimportant ones when she saw the look of horror on my face. We immediately ran to our 6 o'clock through very tall grass and sand spurs, spiked dried plants that will stick into your flesh. Maybe they hadn't planned on that. Maybe they were just high, and it was all a crime of circumstance. We only heard one of them say, "Ah, come on," like he was disappointed. I was trying to save our lives. Who knows? We ran 1.5 miles to the car, got in, and drove away immediately. We each had over 20 sand spurs in our feet, although we didn't feel them on account of all the adrenaline. We never stayed at the beach again. When I was little, around 8 years old, I was on vacation with my parents and little sister in Montego Bay, Jamaica. After a long day of exploring the island, climbing the waterfall, and visiting a market, we were all going to spend the evening on the beach by the resort. My parents swam around a bit, and eventually went back to the sand to lie down, talk, or read. Meanwhile, my little sister, around 5 at the time, and I were building sandcastles at the edge of the water where the wet sand was the perfect consistency for some sculpting. We sat there for hours, presumably. I remember the castle originally started as a competition to see who could build a sand mountain the fastest, but afterward, we just started connecting the mountains with sand and adding to the castle as kids do. We added moats, tiny bridges, flags made from leaves, just about what you'd expect from a sand castle. Honestly, it ended up being a pretty nice castle for a pair of kids. Anyway, my mom approached us and complimented the castle, taking a few pictures before telling us that we should head back to the resort now for food. My sister and I immediately complained and whined because we were pretty spoiled at the time. So, she eventually agreed to go find food with my dad at one of the nearby restaurants instead, and bring it back to us, which is something they do a lot. In turn, we promised to stay out of the water and not move from where we were playing. A few minutes after she left, a man walked up to us. He was probably around 40 years old and had a bit of a beard and no shirt. But honestly, he just looked like a tourist to us. He watched us for about 30 seconds before saying, "Hey kids, that's a pretty cool castle." I immediately thanked him for being polite and went back to the bridge I was trying to build, which kept collapsing from the small waves. "What are you doing there?" he asked. I was pretty annoyed because I was busy, but also a little excited about the attention my masterpiece was getting. "I'm trying to build this bridge, but it won't work, and this part is supposed to have SpongeBob's face on it," I said. It did not remotely resemble SpongeBob, looking back at it, but I couldn't figure out how to do the nose yet because the sand wouldn't stay up. Meanwhile, my sister sat there casually scooping sand onto the castle, not paying any attention to him. "Well, maybe when you guys are done, you can help me and my friends build one of these. We're over there," he said, gesturing behind him. I remember looking and not seeing anyone that seemed to be with him. The idea of an adult liking my castle made me feel validated, so I didn't notice the oddness of the situation. Regardless, I agreed, but told him that he'd have to wait until I finished my castle before we could help him. He seemed pretty annoyed by that, but agreed. 5 minutes later, he came back up to us and said, "Hey, my friends and I will have to go soon, so you guys need to hurry up and come with us so we can build it." My sister just said, "Wait, I didn't finish this yet," and he got kind of angry looking. Just at that moment, A younger woman, I'm guessing 25, jogged over from the other side, leaving her boyfriend or brother or whatever. She asked us, "Hey guys, how's it going?" At this point, I was pretty excited and just started explaining to her all of the things I was doing with the castle, pumped by the idea of multiple adults liking my work. She kept talking to me and my sister about the castle and complimenting everything about it, not acknowledging him at all. He looked really angry and said, "Fine, I'll just go build it myself," and stomped away. He didn't walk to any group of people. He just left the beach. The girl kept making small talk with us until the man was gone and then said bye and returned to her boyfriend or whatever. I completely forgot about her when my mom came back. I told her about how so many people thought the castle was cool, and she just congratulated me, took some more pictures of it, and gave me a small talk about not talking to strangers. For all I know, that man could have just wanted to build a castle or something, and maybe that girl just came over because she appreciated the quality of that amazing sand castle. My friend Leah and I had just turned 22 in the summer of 2013. We were recent grads, and our main goal was to enjoy the beautiful weather while it lasted. As some of you may know, summers in New England are coveted, as New Englanders spend most of the year battling snow. One day in July, we planned a trip to Nantasket Beach to kill time and get a tan before we went out that night. Nantasket Beach is sometimes called Nantrashket for the crowd it draws, lots of sketchy folks. But honestly, nothing that would have ever kept me from enjoying some sun and sand. We had a great day. The weather was perfect. People watching was fascinating. It was around 6 p.m. when we started packing up, and I noticed that the beach had cleared out for the most part. I'd parked my car at the far end of one of the beach parking lots, and to get back, we had to walk about a quarter of a mile. Additionally, we'd brought a cooler, 2 chairs, 2 towels, and a bag of sunblock and magazines with us, so our hands were mostly full as we made the trek back to my Jeep. We were about 50 feet or so from the car when an old, scraggly man came out of nowhere and started following us. He was extremely weathered looking, and his white hair was long and stringy. Again, I was familiar enough with Nantasket to know that some weirdos lurk around at night. So, my initial observation was that he was an old cook who wanted some attention. He caught up with us quickly enough and started asking us about Paragon Park. Although I've lived in Massachusetts my entire life, I'd never heard of Paragon Park and had no idea what he was talking about. I knew there was an old carousel nearby, so I asked him if that was where he was going. He insisted that he was going to Paragon Park to meet a friend and that he was late. He went on to say that he was lost and his phone wasn't working. I started to get uneasy as he would not leave us alone, and there were only a couple of other cars in the lot. There was still a few beachgoers lying out. However, they were too far away to see anything or offer any help if needed. I shot Leah a look, and we picked up the pace in an attempt to shake this creepy guy, but we couldn't get rid of him. He followed us to my car, at which point he asked me if he could use my cell phone. He kept muttering about Paragon Park and was insistent that we either show him where it was or give him a phone to call his buddy. I said no as politely as possible, opened up my trunk, and started to load up the car while he continued to ask Leah for a phone to use. I stopped paying attention to him, and within seconds, I felt hot breath on my neck and hands, grabbing at the small of my back and then my legs. I twisted around as fast as I could and started flipping out and screaming at this man. He looked at me with the craziest eyes I've ever seen in my entire life before, turning away and chasing Leah to the side of my car. She tried to swing the car door open to put a barrier between them, but this maniac kept following her. Realizing he was completely out of his mind and that we were in trouble, I started chasing him and trying to help Leah while he was aggressively trying to get hold of her. We both were screaming at the top of our lungs to try and get some attention, and finally, he took off. Leah and I were so horrified by the whole ordeal that we got into the car and left the beach without saying anything to anyone there. We called the police to report it and gave a full description of the guy, but never heard anything back. The creepiest part about the whole thing is that when we got home, we Googled Paragon Park, and it's been closed since 1984. I'll never be sure what his intentions were or why he chose us, but it was the most bizarre thing I've experienced.